Welcome to the spine-tingling world of our unholy tales, where fear takes its darkest form and every shadow holds a chilling secret. We are your guides through the twisted and nightmarish tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat, clutching your pillow for dear life. Get ready to embark on a journey into the abyss of your deepest fears as we explore the realms of the supernatural, the macabre, and the unknown. Detective Mason Clark had seen his fair share of dark and depraved things during his 12 years on the force, but nothing compared to the chilling content of the USB drive currently sitting on his desk. The drive had come into his possession just a few days prior during a routine patrol. He spotted it lying on the sidewalk near the entrance of an alleyway. Something compelled him to stop and pick it up, a police hunch, an intuition that it could be important evidence in solving a case. Back at the station, he plugged it in, his curiosity getting the best of him. What he discovered was profoundly disturbing and would soon turn his life upside down. The drive contained a series of video files, each depicting a horrific murder scene. The victims were mainly homeless people and prostitutes, society's forgotten ones that no one would miss or even notice gone. Detective Clark's blood ran cold as he watched men and women being tortured in sickening ways, before having their throats violently slashed by a black-robed, masked figure, their final moments captured in gruesome high-definition detail. The murders seemed ritualistic, strange symbols painted on the walls in the victim's blood, Latin or ancient incantations uttered by the killer, as if they were human sacrifices, offerings made to some dark deity or unholy entity. Detective Clark's mind raced. Could this be the work of a previously unknown serial killer? Some kind of violent cult? He watched around 30 videos in morbid fascination before finally tearing his eyes away, feeling violently nauseous and unsettled to his core. Who was behind the deaths? And what kind of deeply twisted psyche produced these recordings? Suddenly the USB felt hot in his hands, as if the evil deeds recorded on it had imbued the device itself with a sinister energy or presence. He bagged it as potential evidence and planned to start investigating its origin first thing tomorrow morning. Over the next week, Detective Clark descended deeper down the nightmarish rabbit hole. The victims shown on the videos were indeed real people reported missing or dead all across the city over the past 6 months. But there were no other clues, no traces of DNA or fingerprints left behind at the crime scenes. It was as if a ghost had committed the killings, leaving no mark or evidence besides the gory video recordings. Frustrated but not deterred, the detective kept digging. But someone out there was also very keen to stop Mason Clark from uncovering the truth behind the USB drive and sinister videos. His superiors suddenly pulled him off the case without reason a few days later. When he tried accessing the evidence locker, he found the USB conspicuously missing, despite his strict instructions for no one to touch it. Masson wouldn't let go that easily. He continued his off-the-books investigation, questioning local contacts in the city's underworld, hoping for any whispered rumors or clues that could further unravel the mystery. He learned quickly that he was messing with very dangerous, very powerful people, embedded in the fabric of both the criminal underworld and the upper echelons of society itself. Rumors swirled of an elite secret society, a ruthless cult that was into very dark stuff. Human sacrifice to demonic entities, MK Ultra mind control, compromising and controlling politicians and leaders to steer society toward their own nefarious ends. It all sounded insane on its surface, too bizarre even for Detective Clark's open mind, and yet it also unmistakably tied back to those chilling ritualistic murders on the USB drive. Just over 2 weeks had passed since Mason Clark first fatefully discovered the USB, when his worst fears came to pass. Coming back home one night, body aching and exhausted after another fruitless day hitting dead ends, he discovered his apartment totally ransacked, furniture overturned, papers and books scattered everywhere, his computer smashed. It was undoubtedly a targeted warning for him to stop his investigation. But that wasn't nearly as chilling as his final discovery. Large crimson symbols, painted across his living room walls, still wet and dripping, the very same symbols from the ritual sacrifice murder scenes on the videos. Mason's rational mind wanted to reject it as coincidence or his overactive imagination, but he knew these occult markings were not random. Some very dark and sinister force had produced the USB drive and didn't want their secrets uncovered. And now they had set their sights directly on him. He was in deeper than he could have imagined, way over his head. For his own safety and sanity, Mason knew he should walk away. Notify his superiors again, hand over anything he knew for them to hopefully continue investigating with proper department resources and support. And yet, he couldn't just let it go. Those cold, lifeless eyes of over 24 innocent people tortured and erased to satisfy these monsters, Mason felt as if he owed it to their ghosts to keep pushing for the truth. Their blood called out silently to him for justice from the grave. So Detective Mason Clark pushed forward alone, rapidly descending into a dangerous, sleep-deprived obsession. He stopped going back to his compromised apartment altogether, bouncing between cheap motels when exhaustion overtook him. He took to carrying his police-issue handgun and shotgun in his car, ready for the time when violence would inevitably come for him again. He kept digging where he could, grasping at straws, obscure cold cases, similar killings from decades past across different states, any details at all about influential secret societies spanning business, politics, Hollywood, royalty. Piecing together surreal snippets of a nefarious blood-stained web, slowly being woven in the shadows all around him for God knows what purpose. Until late one freezing night in the depths of winter, Mason caught the break he had desperately needed. A panicked phone call interrupted his restless dream. It was one of his street contacts, a nervous junkie named Ronald who was often Mason's eyes and ears on happenings in the city's dark criminal underbelly. Ronald had urgent information for the detective but refused to speak about it over the phone, instead insisting they meet discreetly in person as soon as possible. Mason immediately drove over to their agreed spot, a parking garage downtown. His adrenaline spiked, realizing this cloak and dagger behavior likely tied back to his ongoing investigation somehow. After staring into the abyss for so long, finally it was gazing back at him. Swapping his civilian ride for his unmarked police cruiser, Mason pulled into the near-empty garage. His headlights sweeping over Ronald's slender form, waiting nervously by his battered old Buick. Mason cautiously parked beside him. Despite the freezing temperature, foul-smelling sweat stained Ronald's gaunt, pale face. His eyes were filled with a nameless horror, as if he had witnessed something that had profoundly shaken him. Mason knew that terror all too well. It was the same light that left people's eyes after glimpsing the bloody secrets contained on that fateful USB drive. His heart raced, gripping his police stun baton under his coat tightly for reassurance. Ronald wordlessly reached into his pocket with trembling skeletal fingers, pulling out a small metallic object. Mason's breath caught in his throat as Ronald's hand opened to reveal a familiar USB flash drive. It was a clone of the exact same make and model as the original he had found 3 weeks prior. His mind reeled with adrenaline and shock. Seeing his reaction, Ronald nodded grimly, confirming Mason's unspoken hopes. "There's videos, new recordings on here from just days ago." Ronald could barely speak louder than a whisper, as if fearful the very shadows themselves were listening. He explained breathlessly how he had infiltrated a large drug deal earlier that evening in an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront, planning to steal some of the product to resell himself. But what he observed instead was infinitely more dark and terrifying. The deal had actually been a front. He witnessed dozens of Black Robes figures, members of some kind of elite death cult, suddenly emerge and ritually slaughter everyone present for the deal. Ronald barely managed to escape unseen in time. But the things he saw them do, their crazed chanting in tongues, it shook Ronald to his fragile core. Somehow they had spotted him and chased him down mere blocks away. Cornering Ronald in an alley, they violently beat him for information on who he worked for, their leader brandishing a cruel curved dagger. After realizing the junkie really did stumble in by mistake, they allowed Ronald to painfully crawl away with but one demand. He was to track down Detective Mussenclark and deliver him a message along with the chilling USB clone. They see it, you need to stop looking, that you already had your one warning. They control everything in ways you can't even fathom. There's nowhere left for you to hide. Ronald recited the threat he had been instructed to deliver, fresh tears of trauma wetting his cheeks before looking back down at the USB, now sitting in Mason's palm. The deaths that had haunted the detective's waking nightmares for weeks were still continuing, even gaining frequency as the cult grew bolder, more brazen. This was his chance to finally glimpse their inner workings clearly and identify the monsters who were orchestrating it all from the shadows. Mind racing, Mason quickly swapped Ronald's traumatic delivery for a thick stack of small bills, payment for his bravery and agreeing to speak if called to testify down the road. He set Ronald free to get out of town for a while, get somewhere far and safe. Before peeling out of the parking garage, tires screeching, the unmarked cruiser tearing through the dark, rain-slicked streets towards FBI Special Agent Nina Rollins's small field office here, one of the few state contacts he still trusted. Gripping the new USB tight, Mason prayed he could fully decode their secrets before the shadowy cabal circling him could react.